So hi, yeah, I'm going to be talking about the California Condor today. And I did a little bit of research, and they were very, very prominent birds in the Southwest region, specifically, I think Baja California and some parts of San Diego, um, which they started to show up in 1750, and then they were considered an endangered species in 1987. And one of the big reasons why they started to become endangered is because they experienced a significant genetic variation loss. The in the mitochondria area, mtDNA specifically, it was researched by Mark P. Miller, and I'll link the article to the bottom that over 80% prior to 1987 of these birds had this, they call it a haplotype, which is another word for an alleles or a gene. And there were up to about 14 variations that included this specific haplotype or mtDNA, that's specifically. And through different research and whatnot, there's only about 3 genetic variations of this bird left. And one of the reasons being was about midway into the 18th century, these birds were starting to be hunted by for sport or food. And those 14 variations, they didn't have the necessary time to evolve and get away from their specific regions. Why I say that, why it's important is because about, they have about a 9.5-foot wingspan. So it's a very, very large bird, very beautiful. But that's important because they're mostly soaring animals, and they can't really survive in other regions other than that West Coast region. And that's why we saw very similar genetic variations of the same type of mtDNA, that mitochondria, because they were the same. They were basically technically the same bird, but they couldn't have variations. Like, I think to reference Darwin's point, survival of the fittest, these birds, while being hunted off, could not live in other regions. Meaning, like, if they would have had, let's say, maybe a 4 or 5 foot wingspan, which is important for just regular flying, maybe they could have lived in less populated areas. But the problem is they have to live in these areas near the coast. And as we know from human history, that coastal areas are very well populated because there's water there. So that was one of the issues. And what's interesting about it is that a bottleneck did occur. About 80% of the population was lost, and and by 1987, about only 22 birds were left out of what were thousands back in the 1750s, which were very common. So it just shows that one little variation within a bird, or a gene within a bird, from the founder effect, can be detrimental to a species. Like, if they didn't have that need, then maybe this bird would still exist freely in nature. And it's interesting. It also said in the paper that there was no segregation of variations, meaning these birds very much stayed together in these mountain regions, and that they couldn't really very much like pack animals, like they had to stay together. And so what if they didn't have that genetic need? Like, would we still have this animal? I don't know, but it's just it's amazing how quickly things happen when, um, eh, an animal is put to the test of survival of the fittest. So yeah. Anyway,